Welcome to Handmade with Holly. I'm excited that you could join me today. I'm going to be making this really fun vertical slider card. So when you pull on the ribbon, the octopus moves and the inside of the card comes out. In my last video, I made 5 slider cards featuring the driving by stamp set and the horizon dies. I made great scenes with the cars driving by. All of those cards were horizontal in orientation, either driving cars to the right or cars that drove to the left. Today I'll be featuring the Seize the Day and Well Done stamp sets, and we'll be making these vertical cards. They're similar, but there's a little bit of nuance to them. Now, before I get started, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're not already subscribed, and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be notified each time I upload a new video. This video is the second in a series of videos that I'm doing on slider cards, and I will soon be releasing a third video with some fun ideas featuring paper pumpkin. You won't want to miss it. You'll want to be sure that you're subscribed and that you're receiving notifications from YouTube regarding my channel. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. This card features Seize the Day stamp set, but I've also used elements from Well Done. This stamp set and coordinating dies, there's some really great dies with this set, allows you to make scenery looking into the portal. We're not going to use this today since we'll be making a slit in our card. That might be problematic with the greenery, so we're going to opt away from that. We'll also be using the blending brushes and the Well Done stamp set for a few elements. This stamp came with a coordinating punch for the whale, which we will not be using today. We're going to need a half sheet of Pool Party cardstock, and this will be for our card base, 8.5 by 5.5. A piece of cardstock for the front so that we can create our scene. This is basic white, and it measures 3 3/4 by 5 1/4. I have another piece of basic white cardstock for the inside. This is the piece that's going to pull out, and this measures 3 3/4 again, but this time it's only 5 inches long. So you can see they're about a 1/4 inch difference, and that's so that we can tuck it in the inside. We'll need a small piece of basic white cardstock. This is what we're going to attach our moving image to, in this case, the octopus. This is a 1/2 inch by 2.5 inches. And then we're going to need whatever embellishments that we're going to use on the card, such as the octopus or the seaweed. We're actually going to make a little bit different designs, so we're not going to use those, but we'll need whatever we want to embellish the card with. And we're going to need a 5-inch piece of ribbon. And I have this piece of kind of sparkly blushing bride ribbon because it's going to coordinate with my focal image. All right, so let's set these aside for just a moment, and we'll start off by making our card base. So again, standard card front size, it's a 1/2 sheet of cardstock, but we're going to score it differently than we typically do. First, we're going to score it at the 1/2 inch mark. We'll run that a few times for a good score. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to score a second time at the 4.5 inch mark. If I seem like I'm going fast, it's because I have previously released a video talking about the horizontal slider cards, where I go a little bit slower and maybe in greater detail. This video is assuming that perhaps you've already seen that and that now you just want to learn the vertical orientation, so I don't want to be too repetitive to that first video. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll provide a link to it at the end of this video and you can go back and look at it. Also, don't get too worried about the measurements in my videos. I will have a downloadable file that will contain the complete supply list and all the measurements. Also, I should have mentioned in the beginning that you want to stay with me all the way to the end because I have 7 other slider card samples that I'm going to show you at the end. Plus I'm happy to show you the 5 from the other video. So that's another 12 designs that I can show you today in addition to this one and the one we're about to make. So you'll want to stay with me to the end to see those. And I featured a wide variety of stamp sets and designer series paper in the samples that I'm going to bring in, so you won't want to miss it. Okay. Back to this. We've made our 2 score lines, and now we're simply going to come in and finger fold our card base on our 2 score lines, just using my fingers there. And then I'm going to come back with my bone folder and burnish these creases so that I get a really nice flat seam. This bone folder really helps to break down the fibers in the paper and help your card fold flat better. Okay. So let's work on our ocean scene. So I'm going to start with my blending brush and 2 colors of brown. I have Sahara Sand and Crumb Cake, and this is going to allow me to get a little bit of shading and dimension in my sand. I'm actually going to bring in this sheet of scrap paper. It's just a piece of printer paper. I like to do that when I'm filming a video because this project is going to make a bit of a mess, and then I'll just whisk it away and you won't have to look at it for the rest of the video. All right, so let's start with some Sahara Sand, and I'm just going to tap that off on my scrap paper so that I don't get any harsh spots as I'm blending the ink. See how when you touch the brush down the first time, you kind of get a little bit of a harsh spot? I want to have that land on my paper and not land on my project. Even still, sometimes I manage to do it. I'm bracing my finger on the blending brush and using that to put firm pressure on my brush as I'm swirling the ink on my paper. That gives me a base layer of some darker tones here on my paper. Sorry, we really have quite a glare tonight. Is that a little bit better? That's what I get for filming a video at, let's say, 10 o'clock at night. Okay, and now I'm going to bring in the crumb cake. And I'm going to do the same thing, just adding some shade and color. You'll notice I'm using the exact same blending brush that I used for the other one. No need to get a blending brush for every single ink color you have. What I recommend is that you get 1 per color family. So 1 for reds, 1 for yellows, 1 for browns, 1 for greens, and then you'll be able to use them interchangeably. You can wash these blending brushes, but then you need to wait for them to dry. And since we're working on multiple colors in this project, I don't want to have to wait for them to dry in between. But if they get really kind of gunky later on, you certainly wouldn't want to put one that you've used red into your yellow. You want to be mindful of what you're doing there. I like that. I think that looks like beachy sand. But I do want to add a little bit more dimension to it. If you can see here in the card, I have a little bit more dimension to it. And how I did that was I brought in this oceanfront stamp set. And you can see here there's this little sand stamp. Stampin' Up! Has offered stamps like this many times. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but I think we had it in High Tide. So I'm bringing in this one from Oceanfront, which is current. This is a brand new stamp set that just came out in the January to June mini catalog. You'll notice that I'm stamping off first. I'm using the crumb cake again. That was the second color I layered. And I'm stamping off just to kind of lighten these impressions. I mean, I want it to look sandy, but I don't want this to take over what you see in the sand. I forgot to do it there, so I do have one. You can see the difference between the first generation and the stamped off version. So it just makes it a little bit more subtle there. So that gives me a nice sand effect like the bottom of the ocean. Now I'm going to bring in 2 colors of blue and I'm going to work on doing the water. Also, I just want to point out, I kind of let my sand go up a little bit further on this one, just to give me more room for my ocean floor embellishments that I might want to use. So I'm going to, this is the blending brush that I've used for brown. I'm going to set this aside now and bring in another one. And this one I'm going to dedicate to my blues. So we're using Pool Party and Balmy Blue. And we're going to do the same thing. Pick up some ink, tap it off on our scrap paper, and then roll it around here on our project. See, I got a little bit of, I tapped it down there without getting it all off. That happens. We'll blend it in, or there might even be an embellishment that gets placed over that. So if the video goes quiet, it's because I have fast forwarded while I'm applying my ink to the card. That way you don't have to sit and wait. If you ever notice in my videos that they've sped up and they're quiet, that's what I'm doing. I'm just moving the video along to be respectful of your time. Okay, and let's switch now to the Balmy Blue. And again, we're just bringing in depth and dimension to the color so that it has a tonal effect. Okay, I think this looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. And now I can just whisk away that paper and you don't have to look at that mess. Clean work surface again. I kind of want to build my scene a little bit before I adhere it to the card because I need to figure out exactly where to make the slit for where the slider is going to happen. And so I need to have a good idea of where things are on the bottom and where things are on this side. I can fill in some of the other pieces later, but I do kind of have to have some frame of reference for where I want to make the slider on the card. So let's go ahead and bring in some pieces, decide what we're going to do for our scene. So I made myself a bunch of things in advance just to save us some time. Again, I have a whole bunch of samples I want to show you at the end. I have these great things to pick from, so let's maybe lay it out a little bit. Last time I stamped the seaweed, I thought maybe this time I would use the die cut, but it's a little big, so it may not work, but let's play and see what we think. Now this time, instead of using the octopus, I'm going to use the jellyfish as my slider. So that'll probably be somewhere in that vicinity. Now down here, we could put the crab and maybe the starfish. How fun. Or maybe the starfish over here. Fills in behind all of that seaweed and got our crab. And when our jellyfish comes down, just like that. Just like that. I think our jellyfish is going to make a noise just like that, right? And then we maybe could have some fish, but the fish might not work out because of our slit. And we need room for a sentiment. So while I love this sentiment, I do feel like it's going to interfere with the slit. Let's go ahead and bring some coral in. I have coral down here, and that came from Well Done. Let's do that again just to fill in that little space now that I have the starfish over here. I'm going to stamp the coral in Calypso Coral. I don't want this to be too bright though, so I am going to stamp off. All right, I'm holding that wrong. And let's go ahead and get the coral right down here in the corner. Good. This one I did the majority of the elements as stamps. This time I'm doing the majority of them as die cuts. Gonna bring in the silicone craft mat to apply my Stampin' Seal adhesive. Let's get some on these other bits as well. If I had planned ahead, I probably would have used a self-adhesive sheet on the back of this seaweed, but I didn't think of it till just this moment. Now instead, I need to kind of get a little bit of seal on here. I could also squeeze out some glue onto my silicone craft mat and use a yellow sponge. All right, let's go ahead and lay out our seaweed. I don't want that too high, so I'm gonna let a little bit of that stem hang over. And you can see I've got some extra adhesive here. I'm just gonna take that off with my Take Your Pick tool. I can also use one of these adhesive erasers, which I think is going to be a better bet. There we go. This would definitely be a better idea to use with the self-adhesive paper. Mount it to the rectangle of cardstock and then cut out your seaweed. I should have done that. My slider is going to be here, so I'm not worried about that. And I'm going to trim off that little excess stem right there. The sentiment for a moment, because we are going to do another element and I want to see where that's going to go before I place the sentiment. This kind of gives us an idea what we need to work around left and bottom. Let's come in and assemble our card and make our slit. I've already pre-stamped the inside, so for this one I used Wishing You Oceans of Happiness with the starfish. This time I have the starfish on the front, and I'm going to be using that Wishing You Oceans of Happiness sentiment on the front. So I reversed it, and the Hoping All Your Birthday Fishes Come True will be on the inside this time. These little fishes also came from Well Done. Our card base, we folded it and burnished it, and you'll notice that this seam edge is tucked to the inside. We're gonna go ahead and take our front seam, and we're gonna go ahead and put our Stampin' Seal on here to attach it to the front of our card. Basically framing that on the pool party card base, giving myself an even border all the way around. I'm going to bring in my tear and tape, but if you don't have that, go ahead and use the Stampin' Seal Plus. This is the blue one, which is a more heavy-duty adhesive. This card is going to have some motion to it, so we want to make sure that we're using a good, strong adhesive. And put my tear and tape on this inside flap. Just simply tear that off. It tears very easily. It's double-sided adhesive. Burnish it with your finger so it gets a good stick. We are going to need to punch our notch so that we can have an indicator to the recipient that they need to open the card. I'm going to use a 1-inch circle punch that I have. You could use 1 1/4, that would also work. or you could use the smallest die in the layering circles dies. I just find it easier on the video to not have to get up to the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine and to be able to stay right here in the video. Want to find my center in my 4-inch panel. So we've got 2 and 4 inches here on the front. The center is 2. I'm going to give that just a little tick mark so I know where the center is. Sometimes I eyeball it, but since I'm on the video, I'm going to be precise. And we're just going to come in and create like a half circle notch to cut that out, okay? Then close your card up and use your front as a guide, line your punch up again, and punch the same shape in the back. And we did those separately just because this is very thick cardstock and we have 3 layers to get through, so that protects our punch. And now we'll go ahead and make our slit. So I'm going to turn the card upside down. I want to make the slit over in this vicinity. Generally, for most of my slider cards, I make the slit at about 1 3/4 inches. But for a scene like this, we'll want to make sure we gauge precisely where we want the jellyfish to land. So if the jellyfish should be about here, we're going to make a slit that's going to pop out a little bit and have a little bit of a tab. So we need to go even further over than where we actually want our jellyfish to be. So I think we probably want to go maybe like this. It's going to get our jellyfish kind of in this vicinity right here. I slit this time at the 2-inch mark. And essentially what we want to do is we want to have this slit have enough length that the jellyfish can travel and the card can pull out. But we want to avoid this notch and we want to avoid down here by our crab and whatnot. So I think that we will start our slit at about 1 3/4 and we'll come up to about 4 1/2. You can see that lined up here on the ruler on my trimmer. You might not be able to see that. And then I'm just going to come down to about the 4 1/2 inch mark and then slide it back and forth a little bit and just make sure I've got a good clean cut. Lift it up. Now we can see we have our slit and it's cut all the way through. And generically say that maybe 1 3/4 is about where you want to make the slit. You really do need to gauge and adjust it based on the image that you're making and the item that you're attaching. When I did the octopus, I actually did it more at like 1 7/8 because the octopus is wider. I had to make sure that the octopus didn't hang over the edge of my card. And I also had to be mindful of how high I brought it up because the octopus is tall and I didn't want him to come off the card. But by the same token, I didn't want the octopus to come all the way to the bottom of the ocean because I wanted to see my crab and my coral. So you really do need to think a little bit about your project and gauge where the best place is for your slit. I have adjusted them sometimes for my cards. For this slit, we're going to go ahead and bring in our strip of paper and we're just going to tuck that into the seam and leave some hanging out. The best way to keep that hanging out is to bring in your dimensional and add that. Now we kind of have a stopper. It can't go any further than that. For a card that is moving vertically upward, we want to make sure that our tab is here at the bottom and then our project is going to travel upward. If you're making a slider card with the notch down here and you wanted them to pull downward, then you would start your tab up at the top. So your tab should begin at whatever positions at the opposite of where you want your insert to travel. So we're going to go down here and we're going to pull our jellyfish upward like it's floating up from the ocean. And now I'm going to come on the inside of my card and I'm going to put more tear and tape right here on the inside. I'm going to attach the sentiment too. So you remember I pre-stamped this. we want the user to see this. So when they're looking at the front of the card, we want them to see this. So when we attach it, we're going to attach it upside down. Just going to grab my Take Your Pick tool to remove the backing on that tear and tape. And then I'm going to place my card down, kind of lining the top of it up with the top of the card, centering it left and right between my sides so it has room to travel. So I've got some space on each side here, and it's upside down, and I'm going to give it a press and attach it to that tab. And now I'm going to tuck that white piece inside this pocket. You don't want it overlapping this because then it will stick to this adhesive. Remove that backing, and we're going to bring the back down to the front and give it a press. So now inside piece is traveling up. Ribbon punch like I have. Stampin' Up! Has a trio punch with this shape. I just thought I had a little bit better control over finding that placement in a tight space with my freehand punch. And now we're going to go ahead and attach our jellyfish. So think about where your jellyfish needs to be positioned. You're going to cover this white piece. If there was any excess, you could also come in and snip off a little bit. You could, if it was going to peek out, for instance, you could snip that off. I don't need to, I just was showing you. And go ahead and place your element so that it looks nice on the card when it's down, and then it has space to travel up. Now, if you see on this one, I have this sentiment kind of close under the octopus. So I wanted to ensure that the octopus could travel freely and get over that little ridge of the piece of cardstock. So what I did with that one is I actually used 2 dimensionals. You probably can't see that, but in the back there, I have 2 dimensionals stacked on top of each other, and it gave it more height to clear that sentiment label. In this design, I have no need for that because I don't have any embellishments that are close to the jellyfish at this point. Now I've got some blank space up here that now that I know where the jellyfish is going to be, I can fill in. Perfect, that's clearing just fine. Oh, it's super cute. To protect my card and ensure that this doesn't rip with all the motion, I'm going to reinforce the hole with these little tag reinforcements. So I got these from the Tailored Tags die set, and if you use this die, it'll cut out 3 of these little tabs, and I'm just going to use that to reinforce my holes. Reinforce that hole as the ribbon gets tugged on multiple times. So I'm going to take my piece of ribbon, have a 5-inch piece of Blushing Bride metallic ribbon. This recently retired, but it's a really great match for my jellyfish, which is stamped in Blushing Bride. Has kind of has Wink of Stella shimmer on it. And I should mention also this fish is Pale Papaya, this fish is Bumblebee, the starfish is Bumblebee, the crab is Cajun Craze. I used Calypso Coral for the coral, Soft Succulent and Evening Evergreen for my seaweed, and Soft Succulent on the outside sentiment, Evening Evergreen and Pale Papaya on the inside. I will put all of that in the downloadable, as well as all of the dimensions. Perfect. All finished. Wishing you oceans of happiness, hoping all your birthday fishes come true. Really sorry about the glare tonight. Lesson learned. I cannot film at 10 o'clock at night. I promised you that I would have a whole slew of other samples for you, and I will do that. First and foremost, I have my driving by samples with my cars, and you can see I have cars that travel to the left, cars that travel to the right. So fun samples here. And again, I have a video about these cards with a downloadable that includes all of the supplies and dimensions. So I'll link to that video at the end. I encourage you to take a look at that. And then some new samples that have never been seen. So in addition to these two cards that I showed you that are vertical, I also have this adorable one with the Mischievous Mice stamp set. So in order to purchase the stamp set, you need to be a party host. That either means you place your own order of $150 or you get your friends together to place orders of $150 or more. And then you'll earn Stampin' Rewards, which you can use to purchase this Mischievous Mice stamp set. Super cute. And here's the mouse. Say cheese! It's your birthday. Really fun card. I love this. And the way I made the cheese in the background, I got this idea actually from Rachel Tessman. She wasn't making slider cards, but Rachel Tessman made a card with a different mouse, and she made this cheese, and I thought it was kind of adorable. So I adopted her cheese idea using this circle die from the Picture This die set. So I cut 2 pieces of crushed curry, and then I came in with a sponge dauber and I daubed ink all around the circles to create some shading and create the depth and dimension, and followed my slider card process. You'll notice that for this slider card, the slit is all the way over, almost in the center, because of the fact that the balloon is so wide. And I tilted the mouse at an angle so that when the card came out and the balloon was overlapping the insert, that it wouldn't block the sentiment. So I offset the sentiment with the balloon. Super cute card. I'm excited to give that to somebody. Next, I have a sample here with Well Done. This is one of the stamp sets that we used in today's video for the coral and the sentiments here. And the whale only is in one direction, but I wanted 2 whales. So I stamped the whale on Balmy Blue and just popped him up on the card. I used the whale punch to punch out both of them. In this case, I punched out the whale and then I just flipped it over so that I could have a whale going in a different direction. He's a little low. If I made this one again, I would move him up maybe a 1/4 inch, but I was really focused on trying to make sure that his tail didn't hit this whale, and I aired a little bit too low. But I used the sentiment from Seize the Day, thanks from the depth of my heart. Thought went great with the thanks a ton here from Well Done. So thought that was really cute. My niece is really into turtles, so whenever I have turtle things, I always make her something with a turtle. She's currently working on her PhD. She's kind of a big deal. I made her this cute card, says Seize the Day, again from the Seize the Day stamp set, and I thought that went together nicely, and I plan to send her this as a card of encouragement during her PhD program. Now for this one, it was super easy. I just used some retired designer series paper called Whale of a Time, and this turtle even came from that designer series paper, so from a separate sheet, and I fussy cut the turtle and simply used this gorgeous paper, and all I had to do was stamp the sentiment and the inside. This was as quick and as easy as they come, yet it's a stunner. So I'm sorry that that paper is retired, but I have a purpose for that. I need that card for my niece, and so I made it anyway. While we're on the theme of turtles, I also have this one using the Turtle Friends stamp set. So this is Turtle Friends, and I used the 2 turtles from here. It's time to celebrate. This is a great belated birthday card, and I basically stamped the turtle on some designer series paper This is the 2021-2023 In Color Designer Series paper, and I just stamped right on a piece of this paper and then fussy cut out my turtle shells to make these great turtles. And if you see this background here, this came from the oceanfront stamp set. So if you remember, we used the sand to do the sand in our, down here, we use that sand there. So here I used the water stamps up here. I used the ground stamps multiple times. I just kept layering it down there. And then I also stamped some of the rocks to create that scene. In addition, I added some Stampin' Blends into the water to add some tonal effect, and then later went over it with a white gel pen to add what looks like some foaming waves. But this is another super cute card, and likely that'll go to my niece as well. This one was really easy with the awesome Otters stamp set. This is free during celebration through February 28th or while supplies last. And literally I just stamped my otter, colored him with the blends. I pulled this sentiment label from the Give It a Whirl dies, and then I stamped some fish in the water just to fill up some of that space. Again, those are the same fish that you already saw. They came from Whale Done. We've seen those already on the card that we just made. And so inside it says, happy to have you in my life. I pulled that from Sweet Conversations, which was this year's Valentine's set. You could use any sentiment that you have, and I added those fishes again. So it kind of looks like a whole school of fish moving across. Thought that was fun. There was a lot of sea life here today. There was a theme for the video. We, you know, while I had Seize the Day, Turtle Friends, and Whale Done out, even the awesome otters felt watery. But let's move on from water. And this is another one with driving by. You see the van again. But what I loved about this was I stamped this whole scene using mountain air. So I got the van from Driving By, free during celebration through February 28th or while supplies last. And then I stamped the scene from Mountain Air. So you can see the birds, the clouds, the mountains, the trees. And for the ground, I used a blending brush to add some Sahara sand, and then again pulled one of those sand dyes like we did from Oceanfront, and I put a lot of sand on there. The sky I did with watercolor pencils and a blender pen to create the sky effect. And inside this one says, collect beautiful moments. To me, I just looked at this and it just looked like gorgeous landscape scenery, maybe somebody driving cross country on Route 66. And so I thought this sentiment went well, collect beautiful moments. This sentiment came from the Beautiful Moments stamp set. I would call today's video an inspiration video. What I'm really trying to do is get you super excited about slider cards, show you a whole bunch of stamp sets and how this slider card notion really can apply to so many different stamp sets. Anytime you have a critter or a vehicle, a car, an airplane, something that moves is a great opportunity to make a slider card. And so that brings me to my last slider card sample that I have for you. She is just adorable. I brought in the Catching Butterflies stamp set, also free during celebration through February 28th or while supplies last, and made this super adorable little girl who is catching butterflies. I paired her up with the Rainbow of Happiness stamp set, so that's where I got the clouds from the dies that go in this bundle, and the sentiment, you make this world a better place, came from this stamp set as well. So really love this one. Like the one we just did together, I made the sky and the grass using my blending brushes and was able to make a really soft effect there. I colored her dress with my Stampin' Blends as well as her hair and face. I used the new blends from the the new skin tone blends that range from very pale to deeper tones. I use those on her to get variation in her hair and to do her skin and legs. And I use Flirty Flamingo and Fresh Freesia for my butterflies. Just so sweet and adorable. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out all of my slider cards and you've gotten some great inspiration for what you can do too. I'm really excited about slider cards, and I hope you'll tune in for my last video, which will be the third part in the series where I will be making some slider cards, going back and featuring some paper pumpkins. And I had a couple of really cute ideas, I thought, for things in paper pumpkins. And I'm excited to bring you that video as well. And I hope to do that very soon while we're still in slider card mode. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you'd give it a thumbs up and maybe leave me a comment and let me know which of these slider cards is your favorite or what stamp set you're planning to use to make your own slider card. I'd love to hear about that. As always, if you don't have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, I'd love to be your Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. Down in the comments, you can find a link to my online store where you can purchase almost all of these products except for this designer series paper. And don't forget, some of these things are retiring with Celebration, like this Marbleous paper will be retiring in Celebration. So don't delay. Today is February 22nd, and I hope to get this video released tomorrow so that you still have a chance to get some of these great products. Also, don't forget the download. It will have a list of all of the products for each of the cards except for the original 5. Those are included in the download with that video. And if you haven't already, check out that video. Thank you so much for joining me. Until the next time. Bye.